Welcome to the initiative. So, in the previous video, I talked about how Spider-Man's gameplay could work in the Avengers game, but today I'm going to talk about how I would like to see Spider-Man portrayed in the game from a story and character point of view. So, let's get on with it.
Welcome to the initiative.
So, as we know, they've said that at least some portion of the Spider-Man expansion would address what Spider-Man was doing during the 5 years between A-Day and current day, and to me, that implies that the events of A-Day somehow impacted Spider-Man's life, and I think it's fair to assume that with AIM basically persecuting people with superpowers nationwide, it could probably mean that Spider-Man has been facing a ton of scrutiny and persecution during that time, and that is super exciting to me because a lot of my favorite Spider-Man stories of all time revolve around him, being at odds with the police and the media and or just constantly being on the wrong side of the law, because I mean that's literally like the archetypal Spider-Man story. Spider-Man gets framed and or hated by the media. He tries to clear his name, but it's really hard to do that because he's a controversial vigilante with a secret identity, and therefore it's a lot harder to prove what he did or didn't do, and that leads to all kinds of compelling problems for him. Like, for example, after being framed for the deaths of Captain Stacy and Gwen Stacy, he gets hunted down by like Luke Cage, the Prowler, Iceman, stuff like that, right? And the possibility of concepts like that being explored in this game makes me very enthusiastic. When it comes to how old I think this Spider-Man should be, I am craving a college-aged Peter Parker. I think either a college-age Peter around the ages of like 19 to 21 years old, or, maybe a Peter that just got out of college. In the comics he drops out, so I won't say graduated, but maybe like a little bit after that point of his life would also be okay. But typically I want to stay a little bit younger while also staying away from high school, because obviously we already have Kamala Khan in this game to fill the role of the inexperienced teenage hero that is completely new to this, right? And so I definitely don't want that, but I still want someone that's younger than the Avengers, right? So I think by putting him in that college, time of his life, he's in the perfect middle ground between Kamala and the Avengers to offer like a new perspective. So I think that would be a great fit for the game. And I also just tend to really like Spider-Man stories that took place while he was in college or right after leaving college, right? I think most of my favorite Spider-Man stories take place during that time. As for the general look of Spider-Man's costume in the game, I'm really keeping my fingers crossed for a low-tech and clearly homemade costume. They already referenced Ditko and Ramita, and Spider-Man's costume during that era was not very high-tech, so I'm hoping this means that we're gonna get what I want. Ideally, I would like something like the Edge of Time costume with messy webbing, something that still has the general Spider-Man pattern, but is still like very clearly stitched together. I'm a big fan of the idea of messy webbing. A lot of people don't like it. I think as long as it's still like clearly like in that pattern with the perpendicular and kind of curved lines, as long as that's still like at least sort of noticeable, I think it's fine. But I do like the idea of the messy webbing because it gives it more of a, oh, this guy just made this himself look, and that's what the Spider-Man costume should be. The lower budget the Spider-Man costume looks, the better, in my opinion. I think that's another reason why I'm a really big fan of seeing Spider-Man with a backpack, because it just emphasizes that everyman quality he has that other heroes don't. I really want to start getting away from this high-tech Spider-Man that's become popular over the last decade or so, thanks to stories like Big Time Superior Spider-Man, MCU Spider-Man, and Spider-Man PS4 that just have him they give him constant access to this really high-tech equipment, and I'm not a fan of that. Personally, I think the only gadgets Spider-Man should have on his person at all times are his web shooters and maybe a spider signal and some spider tracers. Like, that keeps him, grounded for me. I know I mentioned wanting multiple web modes in the past video, but I didn't mean things like trip mines or web bombs or concussive blasts or anything like that. I just wanted a mechanic in the game that allows us to shoot webs in a variety of different ways. You know, like I gave the examples of we need to be able to do the web balls while also being able to do web strands. And I think by separating that into different modes, we could have like the most amount of combos with those. Anyway, but that's getting away from story and character, and that's getting into gameplay again. So lastly, as to who the Spider-Man villain could be in the game, I think there are several strong possibilities. Scorpion could possibly be the bad guy in the game. He could be hired by J. Jonah Jameson to take down Spider-Man, and you could have J. Jonah Jameson be like very supportive of AIM. I think that'd be cool. You could also totally have Green Goblin Norman Osborn. I mean, Osborn always has government and politicians and media in his pocket. It's one of the things that makes him so intimidating. So I could totally see him like being in cahoots with AIM. And in fact, way back when, like last year, around the time that the Avengers game first started to market itself, I kind of came up with a theory that Norman Osborn would be in the game just normally, due to his interactions with the Cabal and the Dark Avengers during that era of the Marvel Comics, you know. But honestly, I think the most likely villain for the Avengers game would be something along the lines of the Spider Slayers or Mendelstrom or Alistair Smythe. Any of those robotic villains I could definitely see in the game, seeing as how robots are already a big part of this game, and Mendelstrom and Alistair Smythe could easily be hired by AIM to design robots specifically made to capture Spider-Man. And on top of that, Spider Slayers could lead to really big boss battles, right? And, you know, after playing the beta, one of the things I found most exciting was that Warbot boss battle, because it really made me feel like, oh yeah, we definitely need multiple characters to take this thing down. Like, no single Avenger could do this on his own. And I think, you know, with these story missions, if the Avengers are going to be interacting with Spider-Man, then they definitely need some large foe to take down together. Alternatively, they could also maybe attempt a Spider Island sort of storyline adaptation, but that just doesn't seem quite as likely. That might be way too big of an event to set up in one story expansion, right? So I don't think Spider Island is likely, but I do actually really like that story. Anyway, this is probably the end of the video. What villain do you want to see in the Spider-Man expansion? Who do you think is most likely? I'm still going to say I think Spider Slayers or Norman Osborn are probably the most likely, but you know, I gave a couple options up there. Honestly, if the Avengers game follows through with some of these ideas I've mentioned, with like a low-budget looking costume, with college-age Peter Parker, and with the media hating him and the police not on his side, this could easily become my favorite Spider-Man adaptation since maybe like Spectacular Spider-Man, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. The only thing they could do to make it even better at this point, hypothetically, if everything I said in this video comes true, the only thing that can make it better would be adding Josh Keaton as his voice actor. That would just absolutely lock this as like something to be extremely excited about. Till then, stay tuned for the next video, and I hope you have an awesome day. Oh, also, after giving it more thought and after looking closer at Hulk's combat in the game, I think I have an idea for how to achieve this move in Marvel's Avengers. Basically, one way it could work is you could hold square to attach web to like one enemy, similar how you hold square to grab an enemy as the Hulk, but then after you're already attached one web to one enemy, you could also hold square to attach a web to another enemy at the same time, and then you could probably hold square to bring them together and do that awesome attack that I really want to see. And, you know, I think this could work because Hulk basically kind of does stuff like this in the Avengers game, because as Hulk, you can hold square to grab enemies, and you can have up to two enemies, like one in each hand, and then as Hulk, you can also hold triangle to slam them together. So I think if Hulk can do that, then maybe we could have a similar mechanic with Spider-Man and his webs, and I think that would be awesome.